Who might be new to the session this afternoon, I just wanted to say welcome to Startup Boston Week 2024. This is our 8th annual Startup Boston Week, which is quite incredible. I'm Nazma Rosado. I will be your host for this evening, although I will be turning it over to our panel in a few moments. Wanted to start off by thanking Suffolk University, the Sawyer Business School, for allowing us to use this space. Suffolk actually helped provide the space for us last year and this year. So they have been fantastic sponsors. And as you can tell, it's a wonderful facility. And so we're really happy you were all able to make it in and to join us. The goal behind Startup Boston Week is really to bring together the greater Boston area as well as New England ecosystem, right? So we're looking at all of the innovative people and companies that are really generating interest in the area, helping to link everyone together so that we have a healthy ecosystem growing as we move forward. The team that is behind Startup Boston is fully volunteer. There are a few folks who are more internal who if it weren't for them, this would never run as smoothly as it does. But everyone you see walking around in a green t-shirt is here volunteering, and it's a labor of love. I think we all truly believe in the startup community here in Boston, and that's why we're so happy and eager to have you all with us this week. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, our moderator for the session, which is Home Field Advantage, How to Perform a True Competitive Analysis Regularly, is Caitlin Shevlin. I'll let Caitlin introduce herself and then the panelists that will be joining her. And with that, Caitlin, all yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Caitlin Shevlin. I am the Portfolio Activation Analyst at Bank Tech Ventures, a strategic investment fund investing in the leading bank technology for community banks specifically. Thank you for joining us today. So on the founder track, we'll be discussing how to effectively conduct a competitive analysis. And this is not only crucial at the beginning of your startup journey, but also something to revisit regularly to stay ahead in your industry. I'm joined by two lovely panelists, Ben Foreman and Jake Ross. Ben, would you mind giving a quick introduction?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Nasma. Thank you, Startup Week Boston, for having us today. I'm glad that we can contribute something to this community, this conversation. I'm Ben Foreman. I'm the founder of Baseline. Baseline is a prescriptive, step-by-step financial guide to help 16 to 22-year-olds make better financial decisions. I bring my background in weight loss and branded content to Baseline. So I like to think that weight loss and saving money are actually more similar than different, but we'll talk a little bit more about that soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Caitlin, thank you. Startup Boston Week. Thank you for having me. My name is Jake Ross. I recently graduated Babson College and started Build You Marketing, a brand growth agency where we create content for founders and companies on LinkedIn, right in my dorm room at Babson College with my co-founder Ryan, who's in the audience today. And now over 2.5 years later, and after I've walked across the stage, I'm proud to be running it full time with my team.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Before we start, by show of hands, could I see who in this room is a founder? Awesome. Very good. Any investors in the room? Okay, a couple. Very nice. And what about students? No students. All right. Okay, moving on. Anyways, let's dive into the questions. Ben, I'll start with you. What was the world first like when you were determining who your biggest competitors were? Were there large incumbents in the space already, or were you navigating a landscape of smaller, more agile startups?
Yeah, well, you immediately, when you start a company, look at the big players in the space, right? So Mint was the prevailing winner in personal finance. Other players like Rocket Money by Rocket Mortgage, Clarity, which was acquired by Goldman Sachs. So these big brands immediately jump out, but those aren't necessarily your biggest competitors when you start out. They're the most visible, but they probably aren't actually in the way of you getting your first win. So you really have to go wide with it in the sense that who's out there, what are their feature offerings, what are their value propositions, and then who's really in your way of making money and growing. And for fintech, I think Jake will speak towards marketing, a lot of the players have been acquired, be it by a bank, be it by a private equity company, and there's this churn in the space from an innovation perspective that I think is renewing for founders, but also really challenging because these winners, like Mint, have gone away. That was a great product. Well, now there's room for a new guard, and that's what we're building at Baseline. So the big ones are out there, but there's this churn that I think you have to be mindful of when you navigate the space as a founder.
Yeah. I think from a marketing perspective, we're in a super competitive industry. Like, you turn your head left and right, and I'm sure there's someone that is in marketing or does marketing for companies. And so when I started, I didn't really focus on the big competition, those bigger companies. It was more like, those secret freelancers or people on Fiverr or Upwork, or the local person going to events. So it was really tough to find my competitors. So my mindset was, let me just understand my customer, and really work with them, and then figure out what can I do to bring value to that customer. And so instead of necessarily worrying about this option and that option and this, I was like, you know what? If I just give my customer value and provide exactly what they need to accomplish their goals, I'll kind of find my own pathway. And as we grew, and at first we were full service, we were doing everything, and then I realized that's probably not gonna be sustainable for long-term growth. And so now that we've really niched down and had this focus on LinkedIn content, it's easier to find who we're competing against, and then looking at them and figuring out, okay, what can we do better than them, or what sector of the market they offering and why, and who's underserved right now that we can go and help accomplish their goals. So for me, it was a process of not looking at my competitors until I really figured out how are we going to scale this.
And Jake's right on. The customers will tell you who you're up against. You'll figure that out if you ask the right questions to, whether it's a credit union for me or a bank or a startup for Jake. They're going to tell you what the price point is. They're going to tell you what their budget is. If they're a good collaborator, if they're a good customer, you're going to be able to figure out what their pain points are. And from there, do a little bit of self-discovery as a company, figure out where your feature set needs to go, what your product roadmap needs to be, because it's about delivering value and generating revenue for those customers. And they'll say, okay, well, we had a contract with them, but we're not doing it anymore. That says a lot, because if you want to, you can dig into, well, why not? What weren't they doing? Why did you go with them in the first place? So to know the customer is really to know where your competitive advantage is, but where your competition maybe fell down. Maybe they just beat you. Maybe there's just, you talk to a potential customer and they say, well, they got me there. Okay, but I know now what I need to be doing. So yeah, the customers will tell you exactly where you need to be.
Yeah, and even if they're the ones that said no to someone else and they're saying yes to you, like vice versa, anytime someone's like, Jake, now's not the right time, or, I don't think we're going to work with you guys, I'm always asking why and trying to understand. And I think that's given me more insight to my competitors, more than asking about why aren't you working with my competitors. It's more, why do you choose to not work with us? And I can't tell you how much I've been able to improve the value, the results, the service quality by asking why for people that say no. And I find sometimes those people come back later after we've improved because of their answer.
And your customers range, right? Like depending on, we're going to riff if that's cool.
Go for it.
It's, some days your customer is a venture firm. Like they're the ones who you need to close. Some days it's a subscriber, on the App Store. Some days it's a credit union. And you have to be able to kind of shift your message based on who you're talking to. Where venture people, we saw the investor hands go up at the top, they want to hear about those big billion-dollar-a-year competitors, because that's the vision that you're sharing. Credit unions, they just want to know, can you fit within our budget and deliver growth for our bankers, our banking clients? Can this not just be window dressing for our online banking experience, but something that actually pushes our bankers back into the bank for other products because they learned about them and now they're going to interact with those products. So it's really specific, and you have to be dexterous with how you're talking about your competition, with how you're talking to your customers, because it changes based on day of the week, hour of the day.
And how are you soliciting that feedback? And what's the cadence of talking with your customers? Because I can see once the ball gets rolling, you might lose that connection a little bit. So how do you make sure you're on top of that and you don't suddenly realize you're up against this whole other set of companies?
Well, my background in entertainment, you're not going to production companies and studios asking them, so are you pitching something like Survivor meets Bachelor? No, they're not going to tell you that because IP is super precious in Hollywood. In technology, it's all about the innovation. Are you delivering a product that is superior? And so much of that in Hollywood is about execution. So much of that in technology is about great product and great execution. So going back to the Hollywood story, you're leaning on agents and managers and these different sources that don't exist in technology because it's a different marketplace. So if I'm asking Netflix, well, what are you looking for this quarter? And they say, well, I kind of want Love is Blind, but can you make it a little bit more edgy? Well, I don't really know what that means, but I'll try. And then you go back and it doesn't work, and you just spent 3 months figuring it out. And those conversations are kind of guarded. But with technology, it's about asking the right questions because you're building a good relationship with them. Them being the banks, them being the investors, them being the end users. So your question about how do you know to extract that information, how do you get that? Patience and diligence and really staying on top of who you're working with from a networking perspective, because the connection is what's going to break through. It is what's going to instill that sense of Jake can get it done, I'm going to go with them. Ben can get it done, I'm going to go with Baseline. And that's it. It's time.
Yeah. I mean, I think my simplest piece of advice is just ask for it. As I said, when someone says no, I'm always asking, okay, why? And even with our current customers, say we have weekly check-ins, maybe every other week I'm checking in, hey, what do you feel is working really well? What do you wish could be better? What feedback do you have for us? For those monthly check-ins, every time my team or myself is going into these calls, I'm prepared to ask them, hey, what can we improve on? Because we want to give the best service to you. And not only does that help with customer retention, because they're like, wow, this company really cares about the results and the value they're giving us. But I've gotten so many pieces of feedback that I'm like, oh, I could also implement this for this customer or this client. And now I've made my company 10 times better from one customer giving me feedback that now I implement on 10 different customers. So just ask.
Great. As a follow-up to my first question, how has the world changed since you first started? I know a lot, but how has it changed and how has the competitive landscape changed?
Well, I was just at a session going from idea to startup downstairs. And I think what every founder's journey includes is this phase of, am I ready? Should I go for it? I'm not sure. And that could be a few months, that could be a few years. For me, it was a few years figuring out what it was that this company needed to be. And with that, a few things changed in the world, as you can imagine, COVID being one of them. And I think when you consider acquisitions that I mentioned earlier, atmospheric elements, and then regulatory elements when you're talking about banking and finance and security, I think there were a lot of financial institutions who were really aggressive with their push to whether it was crypto or fintech, and some of them got caught. Some of them got sanctioned pretty heavily, and that has actually shifted their willingness to engage in fintechs, and their diligence process has become more thorough, which I think can be a competitive advantage if you're positioned correctly. The other piece, fintech specific, is I'm sure you're familiar with what happened to Silicon Valley Bank last year. That certainly shifted risk appetite among financial institutions because a lot of them just want to secure deposits and make sure that they do it in a way that enables growth but enables stability. And for fintechs, whether you whether you like it or not, we're part of the future, and banks aren't technology companies as much as they think they are or think they want to be. They're not, and that's okay. We just need to meet them where they're at. So I guess to pull it all the way back to what's changed, a lot of things have changed. The interest rates have changed, and you have to be adept at thinking about what that means for your customers and how it might impact the competitive marketplace too.
Yeah, those are great points.
Thanks, Jake.
I probably have a different perspective because we are like your service, your tech, I'm service. But I think the biggest impact has been generative AI for our company. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, like you're going to be replaced. Like people can do their own LinkedIn writing themselves and create the content. And I think that mindset has actually helped us create systems, processes, and strategies that aren't repeatable in the long term by AI. So like really focusing what part of our process could anybody do if they really mastered these tools versus what are we creating that is a long-term sustaining competitive advantage. And so that's really pushed my team and I to figure out what are we creating that genuinely cannot be recreated using artificial intelligence. And that's just gotten us better because now we're able to offer something that really isn't just anywhere on the market or any freelancer could just pick up and start doing themselves. We're creating stuff and strategies that's very original. And so I think that's been like a blessing and a curse, of course, with this pickup in Gen AI.
You just reminded me of something, Jake, which is at the beginning, you were so focused on product features and product roadmap for me. How can I compete with Goalsetter or Greenlight or some of these winners in the space? And I realized you're thinking about this all wrong. It's about what can you do, Ben, that's better? How can you tell this story that's better and different? And, you know, when Jake talks about Gen AI, everybody's going to use it. How can you use it in a way that aligns with your story? How can you talk about it in a way that aligns with your story? And I use the word story, and I feel like everybody does in marketing, but coming from this background, it means something because it's how you execute. It's not what you do. Financial literacy is what it is. Everybody kind of gets the 101s and the 102s, but it's how do you deliver it? I think it's the difference between a good teacher and a great teacher. It's like, well, you remember that teacher when you were growing up who just got it or got you. That's the same thing with, I think, what we're talking about, which is how do you do something that stands out, that connects, that resonates, and I guess it's finding ways that's personalized.
Definitely. Adaptability and resiliency is key. So how do you assess the strengths and weaknesses of your competitors, and how does that inform your decision making?
Yeah, I mean, I think an interesting way, a little anecdote. So when I was first diving in, at first I was like, no, we're just going to focus on restaurants because we're getting really good results. And we still work with some restaurants on like non-LinkedIn type things. And I was like, we're getting really good results. I'm going to really focus on restaurants. So let me, be one of my clients and go interview 30, with their permission, of course, like a bunch of other agencies in Boston and figure out what are they offering to a restaurant that we're doing differently. Or that we could be doing differently. And so I found during my interviews that like, okay, we are really not that different. Like you could go to this place if you're a restaurant and we're doing similar things. Like sure, we might get better results, but that's really hard to pitch a customer on and be like, I know we can get better results, but it's not long-term sustainable to win business. And so that was really eye-opening. And then I did the same thing for LinkedIn. And I was like, okay, wow, like we have something that is genuinely better than these competitors that are out there. And so that was like a cool little thing I did was just go and actually interview and understand what these people are offering. Even if it's simple, hey, love to learn more about X. Do you have any one-pagers or pricing you could send me, X, Y, Z? And that worked really well to figure out what we want to specialize in and be great at.
Yeah, the pricing. I mean, when you realize that you can deliver a better product at a third of the price. It's almost, if you've ever seen the movie War Dogs, there's a scene where Miles Teller and Jonah Hill, it's probably viral on entrepreneurial influencer pages where it's how much did we come in under budget? And it's $100 million. Oh my God, what are we doing? And he's banging his head against the wall. And I think that in a nutshell is why startups can be scrappier, can be more price competitive with their competitors because, when someone wants $30K a year for a simple financial literacy guide, and you can get into the market for a quick win for $10K, you should take that because you want all the wins that you can get as a startup. And for me, that's been key. Don't necessarily expect the big wins. Just take the small ones and just scrape by until you have that momentum, because those first customers have taught me more than probably what I've learned on my own in the past 2 years. They tell you exactly what you need to know.
Yeah, there's a lot of value in having a design partner too, especially in fintech, and at least a lot of our banks are willing to help these startups grow and learn how to navigate the industry really well. How are you continuing to differentiate yourself moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you have to look at what is working and listen. Ask questions and listen to what the customers are responding to. And it took a while to check your ego and say, I think I know what's best. I think I know what the prescriptive method for teaching financial education needs to be. That took a little while to say, you know what, Ben, you really don't. And that's okay, because the customer ultimately knows best because they're the ones paying you. And listening is the shortest answer to that question.
I got nothing to add. That was beautifully said.
And how often are you guys reevaluating your companies and taking a look at what's out there? Is there an annual review, monthly, or is this just based on specific triggers that pop up?
For me, it's every day. Like, there's some sort of if I'm creating content, I'm like, okay, what are other people doing? How can I do it better? I'm always trying to learn, how can we write better LinkedIn posts, get more engagement, bring more clients in for our customers, or achieve whatever goal they're trying to achieve. And so I feel in my research of getting better every day, it's and my team, I know Ryan all the time, he's texting me things 11 p.m. on Friday, and he's oh, I found this, and we should look at that. And so then I feel that's an everyday thing where I'm learning about my competition and how can we get better than them.
It is every day because you can't fight the noise of information that's out there. If you look at LinkedIn once a day, you're going to be inspired or moved to figure out something new that's going on, whether that's how to raise or how to acquire new customers. There's this insane amount of content that Jake clearly is contributing to, which is saying, do this, don't do that, figure it out. And that's great. But there's also a piece of you as a founder that just has to put your head down and trust some of the signal that you've already gotten from your customers, from your potential customers, from even just market research. Just trust it a little bit, because if you're constantly pivoting, you just run out of energy. You're just kind of doing this. You need to make serious strides with your product, or else you kind of get stuck trying to listen to everybody, and that's no place to win.
Do you find that your roadmap is heavily influenced by these customer conversations?
Go ahead.
100%. Our customers have, over the past 2.5 years, they've almost shaped our business, because they'll just tell us what they want, and then we kind of created our own little niche, and they want something, then they'll tell their other founder friend about it, or business owner, and then we just found that we sort of fell upon this market just by listening to our customers. It was almost accidental because we took their feedback.
Completely agree, though slightly different since we're product-based. We have to guard against listening so much where we lose sight of our product vision and we become a service industry where we're just making products for a single customer. At first, you can get away with that because you need all the wins you can get. But as we've made progress with Baseline, does this really make sense to just do this one thing? It's going to take 6 weeks, and so-and-so credit union is the only one who really wants it. We've had to have some hard conversation with customers because Is it going to be a product feature that closes the deal? You don't really know. And you got to be cautious of that because you're going to run out of money if you are constant, or time, or both, if you're constantly listening too much to these customers who want a very specific thing that they might be alone in wanting.
Yeah, that's a great point. Pivoting a little bit, what are some of the short-term threats that you faced in the beginning, and then what are some of the longer-term threats that you didn't see at first, but now have come across?
Short term, I think you're fighting for hours in the day. I think that's probably a expected answer, but you're just clawing to get enough done to close the deals in front of you. And I didn't anticipate hours to disappear from my day as quickly as they do building a company. That's a challenge. Things have taken a backseat. Friendships, dating, it doesn't exist. It's tough. Long term, you realize that there's some pain points with integrating with heavily regulated industries like banks. And you realize that the compliance that's 100% important is expensive. And for good reason, those barriers to entry have slowed things down. So possibly, could I have foreseen that? Yes. But some things you just have to fight through once they're on top of you.
Ben, I was sitting here just listening, and I'm like, now it's my turn to speak. I'm like, shoot, what are the short-term threats?
I kind of made that one up just off the top of my head, so you can.
I'm impressed. I think a lot of my mindset is more focused on the long term. I think that we've built a really great foundation and have a fantastic team behind it. And so now our focus is like on those growth pains that a lot of companies at our stage will figure out. And so I think long term, I'm really focused on how do I build and retain a team that is just like people that I want to go into the office with and work with every day. And then as our team grows, how can I keep that entrepreneurial spirit, that fun, exciting culture while we're still remote/hybrid? I mean, we have staff in Connecticut, Massachusetts. So it's like, how do we keep that culture and fun alive once we grow and, grow big, like bring on more people. So I think that's really what I'm focused on right now.
You just reminded me, this whole session is called Home Field Advantage. And I think to figure out what you have as an advantage is also to understand how to play a road game, how to do things that you're not necessarily doing well, figuring out where those opportunities to improve are, and then coming home, figuring out, all right, so-and-so charges less than us, but they don't have this. And we have hired these type of people to build a path that's going to be better. And to look at what's going on the road, always harder to win on the road, figuring those things out can make it so much easier to win at home. And I think what I'm basically trying to say is your competitors are going to teach you way more about yourself than you possibly could have realized.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Before I open it up for questions, do you have any final thoughts or pieces of advice that you'd like to offer?
Maybe a little bit controversial, but I would say don't focus too much time on what are my competitors doing, but more time on what can I be doing better. So not necessarily better than my competitors, but what in my business can I be doing better than I'm already doing? Like, how can I, if I'm second to myself, like, how can I, beat myself in that race? So stop focusing on all the noise outside. And then if you really just try to improve every single day better than what you're doing, the competitors will be wiped out of the water before you even recognize sometimes who they were.
Yeah, that's really well said. I think only thing I would add, which is a little redundant, is know which arena you're in. Are you talking to money people? They want to hear about the stars and the moon and how you're going to make them billions of dollars. Who are your competitors in that space? And then, in the immediate term, who are your competitors between 0 and 1, between 1 and 5, between 5 and 10, who are going to be those first paying customers, and think about those differences in the competitive marketplace, because that matters case to case. But, yeah.
Great, thank you. I'll now open it up to audience questions. I'm not sure. Yes.
Hello, great discussion. Thank you, guys. My name is Nadia. I would like to know a little bit more about specific tools that you might use for competitive analysis. I'm going to give you a little bit more example. So I'm a startup consultant, right? So I help very, very early stage founders, aspiring founders to market, to launch, and world domination, and everything that we're after, right? So if I look at really being successful in the market, you want to really be customer/consumer first, right? What is it that they need? If I want to do that, if I want to have qualitative feedback and research and information, that makes sense. You have the interviews, you have the conversation, you put your ear on the ground, right? What about quantitative? If I want to understand either in, tech or service, how I can optimize my audience, my value proposition, or other things. Are there any specific tools that you can recommend, or anyone in the audience, that just helps with this overwhelm of big data and making sense of data and managing data? So just kind of curious.
I'll take a stab.
Go.
Well, so you asked about qualifying or qualitative data, and I think we've hit on that pretty thoroughly. Talking to people, you can't replicate what value and insight you get from that. That is sitting across the table and asking those follow-up questions. That's where the real value that I've found came from. But quantifying things does still matter for baseline. Figuring out price sensitivity around certain features, describing what the perfect feature looks like, and using that in a survey or a larger form quantified effort has proven helpful, because I think what it does, maybe more so than actually helping us price things, again, we're not at that point where it's a subscription on the App Store, it's all B2B subscription. It does inform what we can project into the future about potential growth, and that matters just about as much as some of the qualitative things.
What do you do with the data? Is it Excel?
Yes, so, right, so,
Platforms and tools.
yeah, so the Google Forms is a wonderful resource that we use, and then synthesizing it in Excel, we're not that fancy. It's pretty straightforward for us figuring out what that looks like, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I don't have any specific tools that we use to navigate our competitors necessarily. I more use quantitative data to look at how we're doing and what we can be doing better. So I use Qualtrics or Typeform sometimes, but Qualtrics, which is like a platform that I can ask for an NPS. So like send it to a client. If I send it out to like 60 of our clients, right? And I'm like, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to refer us? And I can kind of get like a good basis. I could do performance evaluations that way. So like, how much do you like working on a scale of 1 to 10? How do you feel the quality of blank's work is? How 1 through 10 the calls, and kind of really figure out using data where we could find improvement within the service that we're offering, all through Qualtrics, and it like makes all the graphs for me, and it's like, it's so pretty. So I'm a data nerd sometimes. So, but yeah, Qualtrics is great. Okay, luckily they give it to Babson alumni. Shout out Babson College. So I'm not footing the bill, so I'm not sure. I'd imagine though it's pretty expensive because it does some pretty spectacular things.
Other questions?
Thank you. I'm following up on Nadia's question. I was almost going to ask the same thing, but I'll specifically to you, Jake, you're specializing in LinkedIn. So let's look at just that platform. Are there listening tools, AI tools? Like you talked about not wanting to produce content using AI, but can you use AI for competitive analysis and hearing what customers are saying about your competitors, about you, and what's available on the LinkedIn platform itself?
Yeah.
And what other tools might be out there? Thank you.
This is such a great question. Thank you. So 2 tools I use for LinkedIn. One is Authored Up. Basically, that gives me an entire data analytics dashboard, and then it also pokes out posts from competitors or things that I'm writing about. So like if I attach it to one of our client accounts, I can see, and we're posting a lot about, let's say, zero-party data for one of our ad tech clients. I can then go, and that app or extension gives me access to like scroll through all the ad tech related content that's being posted. So Authored Up, it's one word, sweet. It's like $15 a month for the pricing question. Definitely, probably the best $15 I spend every month. And then the other one is, it's a little more expensive and I don't personally use it, but it's called Taplio. I think it's like $65 or $70 a month, and it kind of does the same thing as Authored Up, but it's separate from LinkedIn. So you, like, same capabilities, but it's a little more automated. And then LinkedIn itself, on your business page, you can set up to 10 competitors, and it will rank your content based on impressions. It will tell you, like, are you posting as much as your competitors? It will have a feed where it's just all of your competitors' posts. And so that's been like a great resource right on the LinkedIn platform where we can kind of keep up with that social hearing. But overall, LinkedIn has a lot to catch up on in terms of these features that these outside tools are building. But those are 2 tools that I really love.
Hi, great panel. Also a Babson alum, so
Roll Babo.
yes. Just to answer that question, so we built actually a tool to do what the lady in white was asking. So we've actually built an entire marketing strategy platform it's called showrev.ai. It'll be GA next month. We're also showcasing at Inbound. And the idea is that, if you're talking about a certain problem space, we'll walk you through who are the potential players, walk you through what our potential segments are, market segments, high growth, medium growth, small growth, what's relevant to you, and build out the ICP and even propose a value proposition, a thematic roadmap. So so if you're interested, check out showrev.ai. We're just updating a lot of the stuff on the web, but we've been at it for the last 6 months.
That's awesome.
It's called a shameless plug.
I like the spirit. That's Babson entrepreneurial spirit right there. Let's go.
So that online question is, I don't really have any direct competitors aside from possibly Google and Facebook in the advertising space. With major players like that involved, should I be concerned about the possibility of legal action from Facebook or Google?
This question might be out of my pay grade. Sorry.
Yep.
Join the conversation, please.
So as an early stage company, those are good competitors to have. The net of it is that Google and Facebook, or whoever the 2 were that you mentioned, you're too small for them to be interested in you. They really don't think you have IP. What Google and Facebook want you to do is to take your IP, go out in the market, prove it. Show me 3x growth per year, and then I'll come and buy you before you get too big. And I'll take it right off the market, and then I'll decide whether I'm going to put money behind your market or I'm just going to flush it. And they'll do either one, right? But really, that's a thing that entrepreneurs get all hung up on. Oh, Google's going to steal my idea. No. You haven't proven anything yet. Go out and do something, prove it, generate $100 million in sales, and now you got to start considering who's going to come get me. Yeah?
I would challenge the person who asked that question to dig deeper, because I promise them that there's someone out there who's doing something a little bit more similar than maybe they've found.
Let me just reinforce what I said just a little bit more. What Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and buying you, what they're interested in is the customer base that you acquired. So unless you have a large customer base, again, it's not going to be worthwhile. Because any one of those shops can probably replicate what you're doing, right? But if you have that customer base, that's worth a lot to them. You look at a big database company like Oracle. Oracle went out and bought like 10 small database companies. You know, they put an end to database startups because they bought them all up. They threw all the technology away. They just wanted the customer bases so that they could dominate. Make sense? Yeah?
Test. Okay. First of all, Ben, Jake, you two have been phenomenal. And Caitlin, thank you for facilitating. I think this has been the best talk that I've been in.
Gonna get that on my LinkedIn pro. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding.
You don't need my help with marketing. So it strikes me that you two are very insightful, introspective, and there's like a deep core of authenticity that you guys are speaking from. And Ben, when you said, I challenge you to dig a little deeper, a question that I was sitting on is, how did these two learn to dig deep, right? So obviously, it'd be nice to have a simple answer like, I just talked to ChatGPT and it was my counselor. But I would like to hear, how did you guys learn how to ask those introspective questions? Did you guys have any mentors? What were the activities that you took on to overcome the discomfort of digging deep and actually facing your flaws or areas to improve?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question.
Yeah, I'll grab this one. I think I was put in a unique situation. So during my time at Babson, for 3 years, I lived in a founder's house where there was 21 undergraduates, and we all lived together and built our own companies. That's how I met Ryan. And Marie Elena also has a tech startup that goes to Babson too, and she was very involved in that community. And so I think like watching them not be afraid to ask questions and fail in front of one another gave me that confidence to go out and just ask questions when I'm curious. So I would say like I'm very big proponents about the 5 people you surround yourself with, like really shape the way you live. And so if you surround yourself with people that are introspective and try to dig deep, which thank you for the compliment, I think it just naturally, it happens just through osmosis.
Not much to add, but really listening and asking and not being scared to engage with people who seem like you have no business being in the room with them. Be a little bit fearless, be a little bit crazy, and go and talk to them and say, hey, like, what's your perspective on this? And more likely than not, they're going to give you some little piece of wisdom that's going to go a long way.
Great question.
That's fantastic.
Other questions? Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, in that case, I think we could actually wrap it up. These guys will hang around for a little bit, so if you change your mind and you want to ask a question or two, they'll be here after the session wraps up. I want to remind you guys, there's a big party happening at 6 o'clock downstairs, so join us for that welcome reception. Thank you to our panelists for giving us that really wonderful, in-depth, and as you said, introspective conversation. It shed a lot of light. So thanks, everyone. And there's one more session. And in this room at 5 o'clock, it's Expanding Your Footprint. Franchise Models Are Startups Too. So be sure to join us for that. If you're joining us online, you don't have to go anywhere. You can stay just right where you are. For those of you who are staying in the room for the next session, just be sure that you scan in with a QR code. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of the afternoon and enjoy the week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Hey. She's up. Awesome.